NIV version. From verse 11, Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to the fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, How many of my father's hired men have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men. So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to his father, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let us have a feast and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son who was in the field, when he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, Look, all these years I have been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, come home, you kill the fattened calf for him. My son, the father said, you're always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now is found. And that's the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Much focus in this story has been given to the prodigal son. But I want you to know that this story is more about the prodigal father and what he has been able to do. Prodigal means extravagance. Extravagance. It means zeal. That this young man comes to the dad and he asks with zeal his property or the share of his inheritance, and goes to have a life of extravagance. On the other side, he comes back, and when he comes back, his father is able to extend extravagant mercies to him, and he is restored back to the fold. I want us to see two things here: the unmatched rebellion of the son and the unmatched restoration that the dad offers. So those are the two areas that we are going to focus on today. And Jesus introduces this young man with unmatched rebellion and greed in this story for our sake. And the reason why I say that this young man was rebellious is because in this culture, you never asked for your inheritance before it's given to you. So the father, either the father opts to give it to you or divides, or he dies. That's when you're going to get your inheritance. But in this case, the young man comes and he calls out the dad and says, give me my share. That means like he's presenting, or he wants the father dead. That's like murder. That's like murdering your father. Not much difference in our case today, even in this country. And I love it that the dad offers, gives him his request. Oh, this is what you want? Take it. Definitely there you know that this dad was not a Kenyan. Because I'm trying to imagine, if I go to my dad and say that, give me my share of inheritance, I know many of you will come to hospital ICU bed where I'll be having knives knives, all that. I'll be sick. I don't know what will be happening to me. But this father is not a Kenyan, really. And because of this story, let's be careful about the things that we ask from God. I think that's one of the things that I've been learning. Let's be careful about the things that we present to God. You remember a story in the Old Testament, in the book of Numbers, chapter 11, verse 18, where the children of Israel, God was providing manna to them. That was their breakfast, and they never used to work, but God presented or provided for them. And then one day they just wake up and say that we are tired of this manna. We are tired. We hate it. We've lost appetite. They start doubting God's provisions. And they complain and they grumble to God. They complain each and every day. And they tell Moses, we want meat today. We want meat. And they start demonstrating. And God is angry with them. God is angry with them because they are doubting God's provisions. And then this is what happens. God says, now tell Moses, go and tell them, I'm going to give them meat. And they're not going to eat one day. They're not going to eat 2 days or a week or 2 weeks, but for 1 full month. They are going to eat meat until they loathe it, they hate it. He says that they are going to eat this meat until it comes out of their nostrils. Try to picture that. We love meat. Men love meat. And there's something that happens when men are eating meat. So they have this conversation going, they're talking, then the meat is being roasted, then the meat is brought, and then there's a silence of about 2 minutes, and the goat is gone. And they continue having their chat to their food. And we enjoy that. But these guys, God says that you're going to eat this meat until you hate it. And this is what he says. You're going to eat it until it comes out of your mouth, out of your nostrils. Just try to picture that. Quails. You remember quails? Sometimes back. You know how small they were? So you're going to eat quail until it comes out of your nostrils. I'm not trying to picture that. You're eating from and then a drumstick from your mouth, a wing from your nostrils and all that. Try to picture that. Because they doubted God. Because they grumbled, they complained. Because they demanded. It was their right. It was their right. And God blows wind from the sea, and quails come to the camp where the children of Israel were, and these quails were about 1 meter. So try to imagine how small they were. So there is basement, first floor, third floor, mezzanine floor, to 1 meter. Quails each and every day. Be careful of what we ask from God. How do we ask things from God? How do we pray? You should have this at the back of your mind. When you are praying, when you are asking, is God enough? Is God enough? How, if God answers this, how is it going to glorify God? How is it going to bless God's people, God's children? It's beyond us. And we should always know that. So back to our story, the young man runs away and he goes to a distant country, perhaps a Gentile world. I know that because there were pigs where he went. Jews never used to keep pigs. So he went even to a foreign land that was ungodly. And he's veiled by sin. And he thinks that this is the life that I wanted. This is what I desired. And God is a gentleman. He let us go when we rebel. When he says we want to go, he let us go. He says in the book of Revelation that, behold, I stand on the door and knock. If anyone hears me, if anyone hears my voice and opens, I'm going to come in and I'm going to eat with him and he's going to eat with me. And there are many ways that we run away from God. Is it sex, service, worship, greed, running away from our commitments in families, as husbands, as wives? We run away from those commitments. There are many ways that we do that. And what is the Lord convicting you about today? What have you been running? What is it that you've been running away from, and especially from God? One of the ways that we are running in this generation of ours is through this small thing that we call a phone. Right? There's some many marriages that if they were to be capitalized, they would be $1 million marriages, so to speak. And they die because of this thing. We talk to people, we meet with fellow men, and we see the devastation that we are causing our families as husbands or wives by this small thing here. It is our secret. It's our secret. Some of us as husbands, we don't want to give in our passwords to our wives. As wives, we don't want our husbands to know about our past. It's our secret. Sometimes it's ironical that you sleep next to someone and you're assured that you're going to wake up, they are not going to stab you, but you cannot trust them with your phone. You trust them with your life, but not your phone. Not your phone. And so we have worked out those passwords, like the Milky Way. The way you take, the way, and then it's 3 sets. Privacy. There is that, there is PIN, then there is fingerprint, and all those things. Many of you are here today. God is changed from that. Who is that you've been talking to? Who is that you've been texting? Who is that you have saved? Maybe she has a lady's name, but you have saved as a dude's name. You've saved Mamlaka Hill Chapel. So that when you are called, it is Pastor Lovi who is calling, and then you go on the side. Who is that? The story of the prodigal son shows us it doesn't end well. Please stop. Is there a number that you need to delete today? Take out your phone and delete it now. Delete it now. Pretend that you are reading from the book of Luke and just delete it. Delete it now. It doesn't end well. It doesn't end well. What are the sites that we've been visiting? Secretly. What are those apps that we have on our phone that are very, very secret? No one knows. That's where everything goes. What are those passwords? That's one way that we are running away from God. If this thing is making you sin, please change, especially from these smart gadgets. Get a Kabambe phone. If you can't afford, come to Lovi. Pastor Lovi is right here. He'll give you a Kabambe phone. He would rather be broke than seeing you going to hell. Change it. That's one of the ways that you're running away from God. What is the other way that you're running away from God? From your commitment. God is calling you to come back. God allows us to have U-turns of life. That we are driving on the wrong direction. We are going on the wrong direction. But then there is a U-turn. That's God's grace. That's God's mercy. There is a place that you can be able to turn and come back home. And come back home. So if you run away from your commitment as a husband or a wife, I know it's hard, but God is calling us to that. Flee. Do not try to negotiate. Do not try to tell me that, I just want to go. I just want to go and, tell them that I'll not be calling them, and all that. You're trying to negotiate with the devil, and you're not going to win. You can't win that. Change today. Paul tells us that flee. It's not a matter of negotiating. Just take that turn and go back home. Back to our story, the young man spent everything, and soon all the people deserted him. All the people deserted him. And so a severe famine came into this country, and he couldn't feed even himself. And famine in the Bible is a sign of God's judgment. So if you have lived a riotous life, a life that is not pleasing to the Lord, please know that one day it shall not end well. It shall not end well. It doesn't end well. But I like it that later he came to his senses and remembered the good old times that he spent in his father's house. He remembers the good food that he used to have or eat. He remembers the affirmation that he got from his dad. He remembers the laughter that has now been exchanged with tears. He remembers the joy that was there. He remembers the affirmation and the security. Everyone perhaps knew him. He remembers that. And he decides, I'm going back to my father. And he rehearses. This is what I'm going to say. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I've sinned against heaven and against you. Please take me back. So he's rehearsing all this. At times we do that. We rehearse, especially when I've sinned against my wife and, trying to go. My wife, I'm passing by the supermarket. Do you need anything? No, we bought everything yesterday. Just trying to find rapport. Please, wives, if I have some call you that, please do not think that they are fully. Just trying to find a way home. Please accept them. My dear, come we talk. Come we talk. And there are many things that I like about this guy, and one of them is that how he apologizes. The way he sees the damage that he has done. Many times we apologize to each other, to our spouses, to our fathers, to our parents. Like I used to do when we were newly married, and my wife was really mad with me many times because I used to apologize in my own terms. Kama basi umesikia vibaya, pole basi. You know that? Do you know that? Are you happy now? Sifurahi, si nimesema pole. Say it sorry. Apologizing in my own terms. No. It's acknowledging the damage that we have done. It's acknowledging what it has cost. That's the attitude that we should have. That's the attitude that we should always have. God being a loving father knows that we'll mess big time. He knows what we'll do. And he has allowed U-turns in this highway of life, just have said. And he allows us to change direction, and changing direction is more than sorry. It's more than sorry. It's acknowledging that there's someone who loves me. It's acknowledging that this person, this God loves me. And so I can be able to change. People never change unless they feel that they are loved. And I said earlier that there are many ways that we run away from God. I don't know about your ways, but there are many ways that we run away from God. But this is it. There is only one way that you can be able to come back to God. Only one way. And that is through humility and repentance. Turning back to God is the only option that makes sense. Like this guy said, he came back to his senses and he turned back. Turning back to God is the only option that makes sense. So that's how we see the young man with much rebellion. But let's see how he was restored by his father. The unmatched restoration. So the young man starts the journey back home. He's afraid if he'll be accepted. He's wondering, who will I find there? And so he starts his journey slowly back home. And he's wondering, I'm just trying to picture him. What are the neighbors going to say? What are my friends going to say? Those I beat by. What about my brother? How am I going to be taken and all that? So he goes to the shopping market. He's in rags, but no one can be able to recognize him. He left smartly dressed with a huge wallet. Indeed, he used even to sit, like that because the wallet had a lot, In the bus, he used funny sitting style because the wallet was full. He couldn't fold it. He passes through perhaps the town dispensary. He's afraid to go and check in as much as its services are free. He's afraid I might be sick. Maybe I contracted a disease and all this. So the guy is a little bit afraid. And he's still rehearsing. Father, I have sinned against you. I have sinned against heavens. Will you take me back as one of your hired servants? And he has a distance to cover. So he goes slowly. But this is it. The father sees him from afar. Even before he sees the father sees him from afar, recognizes him, and leaves everything that he's doing and dashes to him. He runs to him. He runs to him. And this is the father. This is something else that perhaps was very controversial. Because an old man, even in our culture now, is not supposed to run. You're the one who is supposed to run to them. Not the other way around. But this father runs to him. And when no one else could recognize him, only the father could recognize him. So when you mess up, when you're on that journey back home, journey back to God, please know that God recognizes you. God understands you. God knows you. And God feels you. So the father runs and goes and embraces him. He kisses him. He affirms him. He commands other people, please bring everything good for this son of mine. And I want to let you know this, that though the love of God won't join you in your mess, but the merciful God will wait for you. He'll wait for you and embrace you in your mess. This guy was dirty. He had changed perhaps. But God was able, or the father was able to embrace him. And that's what God calls us to. There's something that we do when we're going home for Christmas. You know what we do? We buy for our parents a shopping or something like that. Just to tell them that, Dad and Mom, we are doing fine in the city. Or something like that. We are doing fine. And so we have some shopping that we buy. And we take them. And, our parents are happy when they see you coming. And there's some parents who have mistreated the ones who don't have. Because they didn't come with anything. But this God, this son has nothing to bring to his dad apart from the mess, apart from the pains, apart from regrets. But God does not see what he doesn't come with. He doesn't see the shopping and all that. He sees you have carried a lot. Leave it there. I'm going to clean you up. The road back home starts with a change of attitude. We see this young man starting by saying, Father, give me. Give me. And that's the core of rebelliousness. Even as we pray, give me. That's the core of rebellion. That's when we miss the point. But when he messes up, he realizes, oh God, I'm going to my father and ask him and tell him, Father, make me like one of your hired servants. And that's the core, the foundation of brokenness. Telling God, God, make me Make me a good husband. Make me a good father. Make me a good wife. Make me a good child. Make me a good and faithful servant in your vineyard. Make me. Many of us want to be blessed, and nothing wrong with that. But very few of us want God to make us. So I want to ask you today and commit you. You're going to ask God to make you. And knowing that God is our Father is the first step to restoration. I'm going back to my Father. I'm going back to my Father and tell him this. That's the first step towards restoration. The Bible says that God is love, that he is eternal. And so if God is love and God is eternal, his love is eternal. It doesn't have a beginning or an end. And by his nature, he loves you. Even when you think yourself that you are a sin ATM, sin. Whenever someone comes to you, they go back sinning. They do not go back home happy. They just go back sinning. Anyone who comes to you, they mess up. You are like a sin ATM. We may hate you because of what you are doing, but God doesn't. God doesn't. When you change and you come back to him, he's going to remove all that blemish. So the prodigal son tells his father what he had recited. Do you see that? From verse 21, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Do you see that? But he doesn't finish what he had rehearsed. He had rehearsed this from verse 18. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men. But in this instance, he doesn't. The father only allows him to say, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. And he cuts him short. You're not going back to be a hired servant. And a hired servant in this case is a servant who would have been hired and fired at will. If there is a job, come. If there isn't, stay away. So God does not allow him to go to that lowly state there. He lifts him up. He gives him or clothes him anew. He gives him a ring that you can now transact business on my behalf. That's the unconditional love that we get from God. That's the unconditional love that we get from God. And what are we supposed to do? Unconditional love is accepted. It is not earned. That's what we see from this story. It is just accepted. We have a God that would rather rescue us than punish us. I will never forget one time when I was much younger. And we were living with my grandfather, and for a long time we couldn't see. He had an eye issue and he was almost losing his eyesight. And we went and we took him to hospital. And when we took him to this hospital, the doctor said that he has some cataracts that are blinding his eyesight, and so he recommended surgery. And so we got together with my aunties, and our grandfather was booked for surgery. He had stayed for long without seeing very, very well. And the next day we were waiting for the doctor just to remove the bandage, and all of us were there and we were looking forward. And so the doctor removed everything. My grandfather was still closing his eye, and the doctor said, now you can open your eye, and all of us were there. And he opened his eyes and he screamed, no, I can't see. There's too much light. There's too much light. He wanted to block every light that was coming through his eyes. That's what happens to us sometimes. Sin fogs us from seeing the light of God. We have lived so much or for so long in darkness that when Christ shines his light in our lives, sometimes we run away. We cannot accept it. Sin is that cataract that comes when you do not rely on God. When you do not rely on God. And in as much as maybe it might look a bit painful to see all this light that's coming through your eyes, over time you'll be able to celebrate that you can be able to see. That you can be able to see. I like the song that says, the hymn, I wish I can sing. At the cross, where I first saw the light, and the burdens of my heart rolled away. It was there by faith that I received my sight. May God open our eyes to see his goodness, to celebrate his goodness. Let us not wallow and stay in our darkness. May he come through and light our lives, light our relationships, make us better disciples. And God wants us to come today to our senses. He wants to mold us. He wants to make us to his likeness. This parable tells us of the father who lost 50%. Before that, there is one who lost 10% of his wealth, of her wealth. Before that, there is one who lost 1% of his source of income. But now, this father loses 50%. 50%. But this is it. God is in his own mercies, saw it fit to give himself to us 100% on that cross, the cross at Calvary, so that we can be able to see, so that we may not be bound by sin. And understanding what he did on the cross is the key to help us to start in our prayer life, in our prayer journey. Please know this. No matter what has happened, you have a father who is willing to receive you. But be careful that you're not the older son who saw what the father did to the younger son and he started grumbling and complaining. He says, I've been here, I've obeyed you, I've slaved for you, and you have never done anything. Let us not see that you are slaves in the house or in the fold of God. We are not slaves. Let us cultivate that relationship with God. Let us not be like the older son who was just waiting also for the dad perhaps to die and so that he can get everything. We are no longer slaves. Paul says in Romans 8:15 that you did not receive the spirit of slavery, but you have received the spirit of adoption as sons. When you know that you are dearly loved child of God, in Jesus you are going to give your heart to him, to the Father who loves you.
My Savior bleed, and